What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Scratch Agency podcast, hosted by Scratch Agents for Scratch Agents. This episode is brought to you by On Hand VAs, your go-to for client-facing, office-based virtual assistants. Their systemized onboarding process is key to seamlessly integrating VAs into your insurance agency. My name is Stephen Turnbull, founder of T5 Insurance Services in Clinton, New York, and I'm joined by my co-host today, the one and only, you already know, hold your applause, Mr. Sean Fitzgerald, owner of LAF Advisors in Long Island, New York. Mr. Fitzgerald, how are we doing today, sir?
We are doing great, my friend. How's everybody else doing? I'm pumped to have these two on today because Steven and Mike have a very special relationship. Mike, I feel like we talk. I feel like we're great friends. We joke with each other all the time. But I know you and Steven definitely have more of a relationship there. And I feel like Taylor and I have a really good relationship. Over the last few months, we've probably talked every day for probably more than we should because we're trying to run agencies.
Yeah.
But yeah, dude, I'm super pumped to have a conversation with everybody today. So I'm excited.
What else are you trying to do together, Sean? You and Taylor?
Yeah, why do you always got to throw this out there? All right, so forget it. All right,
are we doing it? Are we doing it?
All right. So yesterday I went to Knicks game. Got invited to a Knicks game with an adjuster and another couple of agency owners here in New York. So I got to go to MSG, which was nice. There were a lot of drinks going around. And when they got to me and said, "What do you want?" I had to say no. And they were like, "Huh? Why?" And I was like, I'm on program right now. I was trying to do everything I could to avoid saying what it was. I'm like, yeah, I'm on program right now. And they're like, program? Like, and one guy just was like, 75 hard? And I'm like, yeah, that's what I'm doing.
Here it is, ladies and gentlemen.
And it wound up being like, they were kind of like, wait, what day are you on? Because if you're on day like 3 or 4, you're just starting over. Screw it. But thankfully, I'm on day 31 now. So
nice.
So yeah, here we go. The news is broken.
Sean, I'm so proud of you. I'm so that's been
like 6 episodes to get that out of me.
Yeah, that's been about 6 episodes of trying to get that out of you, and
now there's no turning back.
Yep, there's no turning back. Now we just need to know what the rebrand is. Listen, let's get right into it. Super excited to have these two guys, like Sean said. I feel like I'm on a call right now with all my insurance brothers. I really appreciate each and every one of these guys who've done something different to help me, and I know in that same circle have done something to help individuals here. So we're really excited to have Taylor Garcia, the president. We'll have to get into that. The president of Jackson & Jackson Insurance in Glendora, California, and Mike Crowley, the president of Crowley Insurance in Syracuse, New York. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us. I know we're going to have a really interesting conversation today, and appreciate you both carving out some time to join us. How are you doing?
Doing great. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, I'm doing well. Thank you, Stephen.
I'm glad to see Mr. Garcia here on the call with all the rain they've been getting in California the last couple of days. I mean, 2 days of rain in 1 year is just too much for you guys, and we're really thinking about you, Taylor.
Thank you.
Someone sent me this. Taylor, it was you. You sent me on Instagram. Yeah. It was hysterical. It was like basically a guy all depressed, and he's like, if you have a friend that lives in California, make sure you reach out to him this week.
Taylor said
it rained twice over the last week.
Yeah,
he can't handle it.
It's literally one of those things where like the people around us don't know what to do when there's rain. So we had 2 days of like heavy rain, and people were just panicking. My Facebook, everybody's like, "What do we do? Oh my gosh, there's floods." My phone's going off, flood warnings. Oh, and it's like, okay, guys, it's just a little bit of rain.
It's just not 75 and sunny. It's going to be okay.
Exactly.
Meanwhile, everybody here in New York in February, right?
I don't know. It's so funny because I've been doing these daily walks, and I had to do it in the rain, and I was like really complaining. But then like this last like couple weeks of me and Sean doing it, I look at him and he's like in a straight blizzard. Like, I'm like, okay, like I don't have it so bad. Come on.
Yeah, I know. Taylor wants to come visit for the Big Eye conference in May, Crowley, and I'm like, no, you can't come until February. Right in the middle of February is when you're able to come. Yeah.
Well, I will not survive.
So for anybody watching, I think it's Taylor's 3rd time on the show and Mike's 2nd. Mike was episode number 2, Taylor was episode number 5 and number 50. So you can go back there to learn a little bit about your story. But Mike, if you want to start, and then Taylor, 60 seconds, who you are, where you're coming from, and then we can get into the exact topic that we want to talk about today.
Sure.
Yeah, awesome. Mike Crowley, and I am the owner of Crowley Insurance in Syracuse, New York. 3rd generation, family owned. We're going on year 72 this year, which is great. And yeah, super pumped to be here with you guys.
Appreciate it.
Awesome. I'm Taylor Garcia, also third generation, but I'm married into the family agency. So it's my wife's family, my in-laws. Our agency, we're here in Southern California, Glendora, California. We've been around since 1936, so we're pushing 88 years. So, yeah. Just a little bit, yeah.
Crowley there. I had a one of Crowley.
He said that. I was like, hold on, now I got to do the math on how much we had.
You're a lot closer to that 100 mark.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so today we're going to talk about the ins and outs of taking over a family agency.
Dun, dun,
Dun. Yep. Of taking over, of getting into the family agency, moving up the reins. And I know recently in the last 6 months, both of you have transitioned into the president role in different capacities. And to give a little bit more background, and we can talk about it, but Taylor, like you said, is taking over his in-laws as third generation owner. Mike is taking over his families as third generation owner. I have a little bit of taste of how this all works myself. And so I thought, what a good opportunity to have a conversation for the person that may be in the family business right now and is listening to this, and they're having a hard time turning that ship around. They're having a hard time having that hard conversation with mom or dad or whatever that is. And so, Mike, I'm going to put you up first. Catch us up to the last couple years of Crowley Insurance, and I think you know been the face for many years. We please go back and listen to episode number 2 about the history of just our relationship and how that all formed. But talk to us about the last couple of years, because I think you've been taking over. The last couple of years is like, here we are, right? And you went from the VP to the president's role, and your dad's now retired and all those things. Talk to us about those experiences. Then Taylor, please jump in at any time, and we'll have that type of conversation.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those unique scenarios that probably happens to 20-30% of the insurance agencies that are out there, is where leadership at one point, whether it is whether it is or isn't family, right? Even if it's just a long-term team member, that are considered like family. When there's multiple people involved, and then there's the next generation that they're trying to groom to potentially take over. Communication is always the biggest problem in those scenarios. I had multiple family members here. There was multiple family, partners. It was my father and my uncle. So there was times where, there was struggles because there was so many hands or people in that meeting or at that table. And the transition is different, and it's going to be different for anybody that's in there, because it's not just a one-on-one situation. It's not it's mom or dad or whoever, and now the next generation's coming, and this is the timeline, right? When there's multiple people, it does cause some major frustration and confusion, and we didn't get a real clear picture of that until one person had to step away. And that's because there's just too many opinions. When's this going to happen? When's that going to happen? How is this going to work? We can't both retire at the same time, because that might set the business back. How are we going to do this financially? Because a lot of times, unlike other acquisitions that you do, family buyouts and mergers and the things like that, the structure you set that up is unique because it is your family. It's usually beneficial if all the relationships are good and the way you can structure those. So, trying to put those together to see the picture and then wait it out, right? It might be a 5-year, a 10-year, a 15-year, plan, and how to get there without, being frustrated is really unique. So I went through that. It's been almost a year since the full transition to ownership and retirement for the previous generation. So it's been a learning curve for sure, because you took for granted some of the things that, people did for you. Even if like you said, I was the face of the agency. I was, the one that was selling. I was the one running the operations. But what else were they doing on the back end that now they're not doing, that is, adding into your plate? So very unique scenarios, all good, right? But it just turns into, if you are in a position where you don't know where the next steps are going to be, it is going to be frustrating, and that's where the communication needs to be. But it's now taken, what, 7 years to work through some of that, maybe almost 8 years, where I was looking at like I was running things 8 years ago, but now it's officially running it, and that's I was okay with the time frame, but I understood the time frame because I kept pushing that pedal down. I wanted to see where we're going to be. I forced certain things. So that's kind of where, we are from an agency perspective, and, now we're just in, growth and cruise mode during a hard market. Right. So,
yeah, man, I think it's two big things. Stephen, we touched on it the last episode and earlier today. Communication, right? Telling the other person how you feel, what's going on, what you expect, all that stuff. Like, that's the biggest thing. That's something, putting myself in the hot seat, I did a terrible job at my family agency. A terrible job. I didn't communicate really what I wanted. I wasn't even sure what I wanted initially. I'm sure I made that process super confusing. So part of that's on me, 100%.
Oh, yeah.
But then I think the other thing is, too, just to tie into that real quick, is knowing what you want. Like, knowing what you want your end goal to be. Do you even want to be the agency owner? If you want to be the agency owner, what do you want that to look like? When do you want it to happen by? And then communicating that with whatever other party involved. To me, the communication and knowing what you want at the end is like the two most important things in my experience.
Sean, I think we take for granted with the thought of, we want to own this. Like, or whether you come in or not, and you have no knowledge of the industry, no knowledge of that, agency. And it's, just because you're family, everyone thinks, oh, you're going to be the next owner, or you're going to be the next person in charge. But is that even the right path for you? Or do you want a job? Is this a job? Is this a career? Is this a path to, ownership? Like, if you're not having that conversation and you're just letting that person go, I can guarantee you those are the agencies that, when they do transition and they do sell and they do have that next person take over, whether they wanted to or not, that's when they start to fail, because they're kind of forced into it at that point. It's like, well, I've already put 15 years here. I might as well, yes, I might as well be the owner, but are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Like, owning a business isn't easy. So, if they're not ready for that, like, that's where there's so many problems that can arise, and it's because nobody ever communicated it. But like you said, you didn't know. I didn't know what I wanted to do. And that's where I think people need to communicate more so now than ever. We need to with our clients, and we need to with our staffs, but we also need to with, our family, to make sure that, we're all on the same page, and this is where, we want to be, and this is where the business needs to go.
Yeah, and let me say something too. Like, I think there's so much power in, and I've just gotten this over the last couple of years, but I think there's so much power in, like, deciding what you want to do and then putting all your momentum towards that. Because when you're in like a moment of like indecision, you don't really have any momentum. You're kind of all over the place. You're scattered. You don't really know which direction to go into. But when you like just decide and then go all in at it, like, you're pretty unstoppable at that point,
Totally agree.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll kind of touch on that too, because I think the communication side for me was really a big thing, because I mean, Stephen and Sean and I were kind of in the midst of when this really kind of was starting for me, because the last 9 years of me being at the agency, being hired in and like I was just producing and I was doing everything like that. Like, there was never talk of me purchasing it at some point or being the owner. Like, we never discussed that throughout my first 6-7 years of doing it, nor was it really on my radar. It was just, hey, this is what I'm doing. And then towards the end, I started to hang out with more or talk to more people like Mike and Steven and Sean and other people that were kind of in this path. And I was like starting to think like, man, this is something that I really want, but like, I don't see this in my future. So what did I do? I built it up, and I built the frustration up because I was like, I'm never going to get to that point. My in-laws are doing this thing. They're not really having these conversations with me. However, I wasn't taking any initiative to have those conversations with them. So I'm building in this frustration, but I'm not talking to them about it at all.
And
so
they
that
don't
was
even know. They don't even
right,
know.
right. So I'm talking to Steven about all these frustrations I have, and I'm venting to all these people and even my wife, and she's like, have you told them? And it's like, well, no. And she's like, well, then you can't be mad. And I'm like, you're right. And so honestly, right at the end, and so to kind of like, I'm still in that process of fully making that agreement of purchasing and everything. I am president and I am running the day to day. My in-laws are, they're a little bit older. So they're, my father-in-law's 76, 77. So he is already basically he's here, but he's, fully retired. He doesn't really do a whole lot in the agency anymore, but they still own it. So we're in that process of purchasing and we're in that succession plan process right now. But I think when that started of that frustration and having that first few conversations, I did it completely wrong, right? I went up to my father-in-law and was like, hey, I'm considering leaving and starting my own thing. Because I was built up this frustration and I was like, you know what? Like, I'm just going to do, and he was like, hold on.
He said, hold on. Have you been talking to Stephen Turnbull?
He said, hang, and I didn't say it in like I was like, hey, this is where I'm struggling and this is what I'm thinking. And I just don't know if like, here's the right path or if like, I need to go off and try to do something on my, and then, so we had this deep conversation and it ended at, I've been waiting for you to come to me with this because up until now, I didn't think you were ready for it, nor did I think you were even interested in it because we never even talked about, you never even brought this up at all. But now that you're having that conversation with me, let's dive deeper into it.
Taylor, can I stop you there for a second? Because I want to ask you a question that's going to uncover a little thing there. But we got to slow down because I got like 18 pieces of paper here with notes written down. The one thing I want to say before I ask you the question, Taylor, is I want to push back on Sean because you said, I don't think I did the best job with this and that. Here's the deal. Every single one of us have been in a family agency situation on this call right now. And the situations and the things that are out of our control are all different. So I'm talking to that listener that's in the family situation right now that's saying, I'm not doing this good enough. I'm not doing that enough. You're doing the best you can for your situation. And I'm going to be completely open and transparent. I lost relationships over leaving my family relationships. And I remember a family member who had nothing to do with the business saying, why did you do it this way? Why did you do X? Why did you do Y? And my response was, I did the best that I could for a 27-year-old that was in my situation with the things that I was given, right? And so I just wanted to basically say, Sean, you know that you did the best that you could with the situation, with the other party, with your family situation, with the agency, with your personal situation, and that for that listener that's listening of how do I navigate it this way? That's why I wanted to do this podcast because
yes, sir.
It's all relatability. Something that Mike says is going to maybe hit somebody that's in the exact situation, right? And I love that. Crossing that off my list. The next question I have, Taylor.
Yes.
Talk to us, and you kind of maybe hinted it a little bit about, and if share whatever you would like to, the hardest conversation that you had with your family about the family business, and how did you get through that? For someone that is maybe going to have that hard conversation that all of us have had at this point.
You're talking like the build up to it?
Whatever that what was the hardest thing? What was the hardest conversation, and what do you think got you through that? And getting through that could be actually having the conversation, could be the way that the conversation ended in a good way. I mean, what was that, and what do you think is something you would give as a piece of advice?
Hold on 2 seconds. Would you all agree that first conversation that you've had with the person who owns the agency was one of the hardest conversations you ever had in your life?
Yes. 100%.
Okay. Totally agree. Okay.
Yes.
That's it. I just want to get that off my chest.
I think since that time, which was about a little over a year ago, I've had probably like 3 or 4 really hard conversations. And it's stuff that it's this fine line balance. And I'm sure Mike has the same experiences where it's like this fine line of like family, but business, but I'm going to talk to you as my employer / boss, but you're also, this isn't even my dad, this is my father-in-law. So it's really this fine line of like, and then also at the same time I had my mother-in-law doing accounting and I had my wife doing accounting. So I had my wife and my mother-in-law doing accounting. My father-in-law was running the day-to-day. So for the last couple of years, I've been vice president. I was kind of doing the day-to-day operations, but again, had no real control. So really kind of the first conversation of having that conversation with my father-in-law, telling him that I wanted to kind of go off and do my own thing. And he kind of reeled me back in and we had a conversation about it. Leading up to it, it was a lot of talking to peers about almost like reiterating what I was going to say of like, does this sound crazy? Does this, because in my head, I was almost like, am I jumping the gun too soon? Am I doing this and that? And it was a lot of just mental prep, and that just, I got to just do it. I got to have that conversation. Whether I can't control the outcome of that conversation, but what I can do is put it all out there and see what happens, and if it ends,
you're best prepared for it.
Right. Yeah. And be prepared. Worst case scenario, right? That was my thing when I went into it. Worst case scenario, he says, no, you're crazy. We're not doing this. And then maybe I go off a different path at some point. Right. But that was really kind of how it started. And so that conversation was really tough. But I think leading up to that was switching fully like down this path of like, hey, we're going to hire an outside accounting team to release my wife and my mother-in-law. And we're going to make some of these big changes that, and again, I will preface with saying I was very lucky with them being very open. I know not everybody had that situation where there's family members that are like, no, we're doing it this way because this is how we've always done it. I was blessed enough with an in-laws that were open-minded. And when I actually did sit down with my father-in-law and I went over these things, he was like, you're absolutely right. His biggest thing was, you come to me with the problem, come to me with the solution. Right. And so I was like, okay, and that was his biggest thing. Don't come to me and just complain about accounting. What are you going to do about it? And so I came to her, hey, accounting's being this. I think we need to find somebody else that's going to fit that seat better. And here it is. Here's my solution. And since I've been doing that, it's been a really big game changer.
So Mike, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think for you, Taylor, the fact that you go and have the initial conversation, right? That first the first one. And he responds with, well, I've been waiting for you to, show some kind of interest. I think that's the key for a lot of listeners or people that are in these situations, regardless. Again, I want to preface that it's not always just family, right? Because there is longtime people that look and say, okay, there is no family here. There is no perpetuation plan, because nobody is... one thing that, every business owner, every person is bad at is, failing to plan for, the future, thinking there's so much time left, right? It could be your own personal household stuff with, I got plenty of time to, put my assets in order and, have that estate planning all, organized until something happens. And the same goes for your business. Like, what happens if, something, tragic happens, or you get to the point where, okay, you're in your upper 70s and you're like, well, what are we going to do with this? Well, maybe somebody comes knocking on the door and, offers us a bunch of money, or maybe Taylor says, hey, I'm interested. What are we going to do here moving forward? And I think that's where people need to look and be like, what role do you want to play with your future? Are you perfectly happy working for somebody, or are you in a position where it's like, man, I've really enjoyed learning from XYZ, but I can see they're nearing retirement. Let's start talking about the plan. And that plan could be next year, or it could be in 10 years. But let's envision it so we can work together towards that. Because I think the biggest flaw that we see is when you kind of have those little, I'm going to say half-assed conversations about it. And then your thought process is, let's take these steps. And their thought process is, no, I'm going this direction. And they might be thinking it's the same direction, but it's just not. And that's where the communication needs to improve so that, people are on the same page. Like, I knew the day that I was going to be the full owner and president, like, for years. Like, we had it in a planned, position of when stuff is, because it was the best on a financial basis. Would I have wanted it 3 years earlier? Sure. But like, it didn't matter, and it didn't really affect the day to day because of the way we structured the things. And the same goes, for Taylor. Okay, I see a problem here. I'm not coming to you to try and fix it. I'm saying, okay, we have a problem. Here's my solution. You good with it? All right, thumbs up. Let's go. And kind of keep that process going. If you don't have these working relationships, it's going to cause massive problems.
For sure. Just like in marriage, you got to communicate.
Yeah,
communication's everything, man. And I can look back and everything that I was either frustrated with or didn't get solved, or there was always an issue. It was due to lack of communication. And every time we had that conversation, even though it may have gotten ugly at times or whatever happened, at the end of it, it always was beneficial.
Let's just call it what it is. Men in general are pretty terrible at sharing their feelings. Let's just be honest.
Yep.
So I think that is yourself, Sean.
Yeah.
So I want to ask Crowley this question because this may give us some deja vu here. But so okay, we talked. I think one of the best things that I just took out of what you guys said is what Taylor said about don't bring just the complaint, bring the solution.
Yeah.
Right. And I also want to repeat what Crowley said. We're talking about family business, but it's all the same. Any type of transition in the business or whatever it is in an agency. What's the next step, do you think, Mike, if you bring the complaint, you bring the solution, you bring the concerns, and there just isn't what Taylor was lucky to have with let's have the conversation and I see your point and I understand and all of those things. There isn't that buy-in. There isn't that understanding. What do you think the next step is in the conversation for that individual?
I think a lot of it has to depend on what the situation is, but there's where you got to have the plan B, C, and D ready to go, and know the response. Okay, why is this going to be a problem or a no? Right? Taylor mentioned how open his in-laws were to his ideas. Okay, a lot of ideas get shut down, but why did they get shut down? Well, scared to change is one of the big ones, especially from an older generation. We've always done it this way, and I don't really want to learn something new, and the staff doesn't want to learn something new, or whatever the case is, or I don't think we need that, right? It's a money issue, okay? I'm going to talk about a generation like that in, people that are in their 70s, late 60s, 80s, right? And if they're running businesses, they came from the generation where the money was a completely different, topic than it is today, and the way money needs to be spent, the way businesses operated, what you need to do for, an independent agency. And so they're scared to spend money for no return on investment. Those are the people that are like, well, what's the ROI? Like immediately, regardless of what the stuff is. Like, what's the ROI on this? Well, maybe there isn't a tangible ROI to this, and you're not going to be able to actually track it, but we're going to be able to see because it's going to improve this and improve retention, keep claims that whatever the situation is. So you got to know what those reasons are when you're having that conversation. So when they say no, you're not like, oh, why? Like, you got to be able to read the situation to be like, well, is it because the solution is going to cost X, Y, and Z? Is the solution difficult for them to understand because it's something to do with technology? There's technology now in these businesses that, I shake my head at almost 40 years old. So, you sit there and say, how can a bot do this, and this, and it's now going to save time? Like, how does that make sense? Where does that come into play? So I can't imagine a generation that ran these businesses when there was no technology and there was paper rating and, and all this other stuff. So you got to understand where they're coming from and be able to solve the problem or express the problem with the solution in a way that they're going to actually understand and, hide their fears. And I think that's the key. If there's not buy-in, it's because you're not doing a good enough job explaining how it's going to solve the problem for the agency, how it's going to make more money, how it's going to improve efficiency, or whatever the case may be, where they're going to understand it. I mean, think about it. I mean, we do this all day where we explain insurance. And it doesn't matter if the person is 22 years old or 82 years old. We have those same conversations where people don't understand insurance. Okay? They shouldn't really understand insurance to that point. That's why they hire us, or that's why they do business with us. But when it comes to business owners, if you're explaining something, or your employees, you're explaining something in a way that they just don't understand, you're not explaining it the way that they need to hear it. And that's where you gotta know how to adjust based off the personalities. And I think the better you get at that, the more success you're going to have on those conversations.
Say that one more time. Explain it the way they need to hear it.
Right.
Explain it the way they need to hear it.
I mean,
That's good.
I mean, that's been probably my biggest struggle in a leadership role over these years is I think I'm explaining it one way because it's what makes sense in my head. And when I find one or two people or three people that pick it up on it, but two or three people don't pick up on it, and it's like, wait, well, they got it. Like, how come you're not getting it? Like, I must have done it the right way, but it's not. Like, even my wife says it all the time. They're like, she's like, you're probably explaining it the way you think you need to hear it. You need to explain it like you're explaining it to, your 8-year-old.
Yeah, Crowley, it's so funny. A few months back, I read a book called Your Next 5 Moves by Patrick Bet-David. And he's kind of talking like exactly what you're talking about now, like thinking 5 moves ahead in the situation. So if you bring this idea to them and they shut it down, what's your response going to be?
Right.
You know, what's your plan B, C, D, like you said, right? And I think another just really good thing to touch on, because now I'm replaying situations in my head.
I'm having nightmares over here.
Yeah, Steven's not going to go to sleep tonight. Is, you know, these can be, because, you know, I remember the conversation, my heart beating through my freaking chest, okay? So your emotions are at a freaking, as high as they can be, virtually.
Yeah.
So I would tell people, if your idea gets shut down initially, take a deep breath. Don't respond in an irrational way, and just think about, like Crowley said. And this is why I think what Crowley said is so important, is because being a few moves ahead is going to help you be more calm in that situation. If you don't have a plan B, C, D, and they shoot down your idea, you're going to freak out in the moment. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Because you're going to feel like you're backed into a corner. So take a deep breath.
Yeah.
One thing I'll add to that is find out what works for you in that moment. I'm a very emotional person. I have the same type of problems, Sean, that you were relating to, as far as like having that conversation, like getting worked up and nervous for it. Something that worked for me is I had everything in front of me that I wanted to talk about right in front of my face, either on a piece of paper or on a computer. If this conversation goes so far in left field, I still know, because right in the computer screen in front of me is the bullet point of why we're here and why we have to have that conversation. And to Mike's point of how I need to make the approach, maybe it was even scripted. I mean, I can go back and it could be even scripted of how you want to say it, because you need to focus on how to say it in that part of the emotion. I mean, that is I was just on Aaron Gordon's podcast, and he said, "Take me back to the night that you left the family agency." I'm like, Aaron, no, I was already there. I don't want to ever go back to that. I never want to go back to that. One of the things, Taylor, that I want to ask you, and then Sean or Mike, maybe you have a story you can share about it. But for you, Taylor, in taking over, what was the pivotal moment? The pivotal moment from, hey, Pops, I'm starting my own shop, to, okay, we can work. Like, what for you? What conversation? What worked that now you're the president of Jackson & Jackson? What was that pivotal moment for you?
I think the pivotal moment, I mean, it was a series of conversations, but I think what really stemmed down to it was just sharing, like Mike was saying, sharing what I envisioned the plan of being, right? Because when I went to him, he wanted to hear what I thought the plan should be. Now, he probably already in his head had his own plan, but he wanted to hear what my thoughts were there. And so that first conversation, and now I very much, like Mike was saying too, about talking to certain people, like how they want to be. I know how my father-in-law reacts, and I know how my mother-in-law reacts. They're very different, right? My father-in-law needs that. He'll hear it all. He'll kind of do this like chuckle, and then he'll need to ponder on it for like a day. Then he'll come back with this whole elaborate plan. I knew I wasn't going to get something from him in that moment. I knew my mother-in-law could come up with something on the spot. So she kind of chimed in. He had to sit, and then really, I mean, what it really was that second day he came back to me, just, okay, I had all day to think about it, all night. Here's my thought. What do you think? And, you know, we're going to do a 2 to 3 year plan, this and this. And he had it all kind of written out. There was no real like moment other than me having that initial conversation. Right. And so really that's kind of what it stemmed to. And I don't feel like I did anything specific other than bringing it to his attention of saying, this is something that I'm interested in. This is something I want. Because please keep in mind, like at the time, our agency, my in-laws were fairly retired already. So our agency was kind of just plateauing because there's nobody in that seat of leadership to keep it going up. So we were kind of just like this, and then we were kind of obviously doing this because you're not growing. And so I kind of went to him like, hey, we need somebody here in that seat to like keep us growing versus just like maintaining. And so that's kind of why I kind of really pushed it, because me being a driven person, I was like, I don't want to be at a workplace where it's just kind of maintaining. And so that's kind of why I had that conversation. But Plus, and then he always jokes now because he's like, Taylor, something clicked with your mindset in the last like 2 or 3 years. And he kept asking me, like, what was that thing? Because up till 8 years ago, you were just in a sales career and you didn't really feel like you wanted ownership. Like you just kind of were doing your own thing. And I kind of really stemmed it down to the people I was surrounding myself around was a huge, huge aspect of it. All of a sudden being introduced to other agency owners and how they were doing, and talking to Mike and talking to other people that were in a similar situation. That kind of really pushed me to start that conversation,
Well,
I don't know if that answered your question,
I met these two guys in New York. They both left their family agency and seemed like cool dudes, so I'm going to try it.
Kind of. So no, but you know what? I still will say, and I tell my wife this. I was like, if it wasn't for those late night conversations with Steven and with Sean and a few others, like I probably wouldn't be where I was, because I would have honestly been sitting here selling insurance, still probably pretty frustrated at the situation of not changing how I want it to be, but I'm not portraying what I want. You know what I mean? I'm not vocalizing it. So having some of those conversations with peers like you guys really did kind of encourage me and push me to kind of have a different mindset,
Yeah, I think kids too, because I know you have a couple young kiddos over there, TG.
Yeah,
I think kids play a big role in that. It's so funny. Pre-kids, I thought I was so motivated. I have such good. I'm always motivated. Good. Then I had 2 kids, and I'm like, holy shit, your motivation just goes to a whole nother level you didn't even know existed. Yeah. And I think for you, like, I've just seen the way you've talked about and interacted with your kids. And I remember we've had a few conversations. It's like a few conversations of like, monkey see, monkey do, right?
Mm.
Like, I wanna come off a certain way in front of my children that, I'm strong, successful, family oriented. I'm a business owner. I take self-improvement stuff. I'm loving, caring. I'm a good father. Like, those are like the types of things that I want my children to learn. And I know that was a huge role for you too.
Absolutely.
How old are your kids, TJ?
Yeah. So my son's 8 and my daughter's 5. So my son is starting to ask questions about certain things, about, why I wake up as early as I do, or why do you want to be the boss at Jack? He says, why do you want to be the boss over there? All you do is pay all the bills. That's not fun. And we would like have conversations, right? And so we just start to have those conversations, and he's starting to kind of like ask questions about it. And it's just really interesting. And you're absolutely right, Sean. Like, that's one thing. And I know Mike has kids too, that we just want to be that role model for them and to show them, because that is one thing that my parents did really well at me growing up, was that work ethic, was showing me what that's like. And, hey, at 16, I started to work, and it was just like that really is important to me, Yeah.
And you could tell them all you want, but I think that what's going to do the best is showing them,
Yeah, absolutely.
Mike, what do you think about that when you think of that question? What was for you the pivotal moment in the whole picture of a family business transition, whether it be family or not? Like we said, what was that pivotal moment for you?
I think it was the frustration that I was looking for that 5-step ahead approach, and it didn't need to be today, right? And it wasn't like I wasn't part of conversations, but it when you've been around long enough and seeing how the independent insurance agency channel had 10 billion agents, on every street corner, on every, whatever else, and how those businesses, progressed out to the point where, okay, let's all get clobbered up by bigger people. Let's, there wasn't a lot of perpetuation in-house unless it was, a family-based. And having the thought process of being like, all right, here's where I want to be. Here's where I'm taking the business personally in the sales role, but I need to make changes from an agency's perspective, not just the way that I'm, bringing on business and bringing on clients and servicing clients. We need to be doing this as a whole. It's not 2 different agencies. And at times it kind of felt like I was running my own little, agency within my office with the support, but it was like there were 2 different things. And it just got to the point of frustration of like, okay, we got to start building to make this all one, because at some level, my growth and their coast, right, they need to equal out before I overpower, the size of the agency as we continue to grow. And I think I saw that, and I was looking forward. Okay, there's two people here. You're not both going to just magically leave one day. Like, we got to start a process here. And, and how they did it with my grandfather and how we've done it with some acquisitions in the past, you saw the writing on the wall of how this is done. It's not I'm not going to see, it's not like somebody just left, right? And you're not going to see them again. There is like processes through this. Okay. And in your semi-retirement stage, you're going to do this. And in your full retirement stage, you might still do this. And this is how the structure is going to be. You had to get it started. Like, I wasn't going to sit there at, age 50 and be like, all right, let's get started. Like, as I, carried the shoulders, the weight for a long time. So it was getting to that point. But I agree with Taylor. You surround yourself with people and you get the ideas from other successful people, regardless if they're in the industry or not in the industry, and you start seeing the path that you want to take for yourself, right? And that, I think, is the key to push you to that next level, because you're getting the confidence from them. You're not just staying inside your four walls to say, okay, this is what I got to do because this is what the four walls are telling me to do. You are now bridging outside your comfort zone with the people that are going to push you into the right path, and then you got to take it and have the guts to go and take it, and be prepared if it doesn't go the right way. And I think that's what all of us have done, and doesn't matter if the solution stayed the same, right? You decided, okay, your path is one way and our path is this way. But I would say it worked out for everybody, in the long run.
You sure? You promise?
I promise.
Yes.
Hey, one last question, and to the both of you that I just thought about here. Because I know both of your stories, right? I know the details. I know everything. And share whatever you want. Don't share what you don't want. But talk to us about a situation that you both have had of family members in certain seats that maybe needed to be adjusted, or having hard conversations about that. Crowley just talked about it. There was two owners. It was a conversation of, we got to figure something out because we don't have room, or whatever that is, and that's hard conversations. I know you both have had family members that have been in the family business that have a seat, they have a role, they have a seat on the bus because they're family, and there has been very hard conversations around that, and you both have positively resolved those issues. So, TG, you look excited about this topic. Why don't you go first? No, you don't have to get into detail or anything. I'm just talking more about someone that may be listening to that's thinking. I mean, very, very candidly, I was in that same exact situation where there was two different family members that I was one of, and I'm thinking, this isn't going to work out. What am I going to do? And there's a seat that's given just because you're family, and that's a hard thing, because when you're in the family, everybody has the opportunity, right?
Right.
Everybody has the opportunity. But if you get into the family and you have somebody that's moving at 70 miles an hour and the other one's moving at 15 with their flashers on, it's a different situation that you got to figure out.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So
absolutely.
What are your thoughts around that? And then we can wrap this up, because I could talk all day about this topic. But
yeah. It for me, it all stems back to having that, when you're having that conversation, what is the outcome? What is the plan? What do you see? Because for us, there was a few. I mean, my wife was one of them, right? It was like, she just wasn't, not saying that she was doing a bad job or anything, she just wasn't in the right seat. And it was one of those conversations where, okay, if this is my idea and this is what I see needs to change, why and how? And what does that look like? Who are we going to replace that person with, right? And what is the reasoning behind it? Because really, if I were to go and say, hey, I don't think this person should be in the seat because they're just not the right fit, like I had to kind of elaborate on it a little bit. And it was really difficult for me. That was probably the biggest one. And I don't need to get into the personal side of it, because like you were saying, Stephen, but I think the biggest thing for that was recognizing who was in that seat, and hey, I have the vision of, I want to be here, and I don't truly think that these people or this person is willing to, or wanting to, or capable to, or however you want to look at it. And then just having that conversation of saying, okay, what does this look like? Why are they in the wrong seat? Is there another seat on the bus that maybe fits them better? Like my wife, maybe she would have been great in HR because she's a great person, but accounting just wasn't her thing, or finding that spot. And I think just again, all comes back to that communication, having that plan, like going forward, and having that that vision of what it looks like, because you kind of have to have that before you can just say, hey, I don't think this person's the right seat, right? Like,
man, you had a
Go
lot
ahead.
of tough conversations, TG.
I've had quite a few, but every single one, at the end of the day, yes, they've been hard in the moment and it was emotional at times.
Yeah.
It's only made everything better so far. Whether the outcome was maybe a little poor in the beginning, over time, we're all looking at it now. It's like the family's stronger, the agency's stronger. And I know not every situation is like that, but for us, that's kind of how it worked out. And maybe it was ugly in the moment, but it ended up working out to where we can kind of hash it out a little bit, figure out what's the best solution, and we kind of all came to a mutual agreement, thankfully.
I think everybody deep down knew, right? In those scenarios, people really deep down knew, and you never like to get called on the carpet with some of these things, especially in a family setting. But that's where the come back the next day. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. This probably is not the right seat for me. Stephen,
Right.
I love the analogy of going 70 miles an hour and one going 15 with flashers on. And
Absolutely.
that probably was a lot more of my situation, is that I was going 70 or 170, right? To the point where, whether they wanted to or not, they couldn't keep up. And whether those conversations are, either, it's like Taylor going in and saying, I think I might start my own, right? That was the initial conversation. Why? Because that's what he was already thinking, that, well, if I'm going 70 and you're going 15, I don't think you're going to speed up and jump on my bus. So I'm just going to go this way, respectfully. And they just kind of put up the stop sign and being like, whoa, well, no, we're okay. We got to just, I'm not going to sit in the back anymore. I'm going to sit in the front of the bus, right? Or however the case may be. So I think now it's making sure that the people understand who's driving the bus and then who's on the seat of the bus.
Yeah.
And as long as the people are okay with that and you're okay with it, yeah, you still deserve a spot, but you got to make sure that you can stay on and you're not flying out the window. Because if you're going to fly out the window, then, this might not be the best situation for you.
Right.
What I
And
think
there's
is...
that.
No, go ahead, Crowley. Sorry.
I was going to say, and I think that's the key, right? And again, it goes back to communication, but it goes back to Taylor understanding I'm driving the bus. Who's, where am I going? And who, and the same for us. Like, I was driving the bus long before I was actually driving the bus, and got to the point where it was like, okay, everyone finally realized, okay, Mike's driving the bus. Let's jump on his bus because, he's getting there a lot faster than, I'm gonna.
Yeah. Yeah. You know what I think one beautiful takeaway is from this conversation we had is that, and I truly believe this, at the end of every extremely hard conversation, there's going to be some sort of a beautiful result. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
We all said it, top hardest conversations of our life. And look what happened to each one of us.
None of us would be on this call right now if it wasn't for those hard conversations.
Right.
No.
Absolutely. That's what I mean. Like, no matter what the outcome is, whether maybe even if it goes south, then it forces you to get out of a situation that you necessarily don't want to be in the first place, right? Or it goes well and you end up working it out and making a plan and setting it up. So I think either outcome, one's better than the other. But I think in the end of the day, I truly think no matter what the outcome is, your path will be the better path, whether because then you could be in the agency being miserable and frustrated and it doesn't go anywhere. And then it kind of forces you to go do something else. And then I think in the end, it'll be better that way, or you stay in and, grow from inside.
Yep.
Gentlemen, we have to wrap this up. And, I'm sure that we'll do this again, but this was a fantastic conversation. I want to thank you guys for the transparency, and I want to thank you guys for, just the conversation. I want to highlight a few things. And then, Sean, if you have any closing words, we can wrap it up. But one thing I want to say is if anybody feels like they're in any type of situation that we just talked about, reach out to any of us, please. Because I can tell you, if it wasn't for the connection that I made on accident with Mr. Mike Crowley, T5 Insurance wouldn't be a thing. The Scratch Agency podcast wouldn't be a thing. And I can't even tell you what life would look like right now. The friendships that are here wouldn't be a thing. So reach out and have a connection to just have a conversation, because I know for sure every single person on this call would take the time to walk through your situation, relate with you, be it listening ear, whatever that might be. That's number one. Number two, I want to just say never be limited by other people's limited imaginations. We talked a lot about what could it look like to have these conversations, but in some cases like mine, you can only do so much, and you have to maybe do what you got to do. And the experience is kind of what we touched on. The experiences that you do, the hard conversations that you have are made up of what you are becoming. You know, when I left my family agency, all I heard was, oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry it came to this. I'm so sorry. Instead of, look what I learned. Look at the hard things that I went to at the ripe age of 27, the hard conversations that I had, and what I'll be able to bring that through to my life, to my future children, to my future employees, and the lessons that I learned. There wasn't a failure there, where there was lessons learned along the way. And again, last thing, wrapping up, there's a reason the flight attendants tell you to put your mask on before helping others. Let that sink in. There's a reason the flight attendants tell you to put your mask on before helping others. And that's what you got to do. I want to just wrap up here by highlighting things. Please, the three, you let me know if I'm missing everything. One, be honest in the conversation. Number two, just do it. Have the conversation. It's going to be hard. Make sure the communication's there. I think one of the biggest ones, talk their language. How do they need to hear it? Like Mr. Crowley just said, how do they need to hear it? Present it that way. And draw the solution or the plan. Have the solution, but what's the outcome going to be? Taylor said that. What is the outcome going to be? Mr. Fitzgerald, what any closing thoughts before we wrap this thing up there?
No, man, you ended that beautifully. Just thank you, Mike. Thank you, Taylor. I appreciate both of your friendships, man. Thank you for coming on, like Steven said, and just being so open with everything. I think this is a conversation that definitely needed to be had, and that hopefully a few people can get value from.
Absolutely. Mike and Taylor, again, thank you very much. Just real quick, where can people get in touch with you? What's the best maybe social network to connect with you when every single family agency across the country reaches out when this drops? What's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
So Facebook or LinkedIn probably for me are the best, or you can send an email, mike@crowleyinsurance.com. It's, having the plan is crucial, and being patient, I think, is another one. Like Taylor said, here's a 2 to 3 year plan, right? This is what we're going to do, and here's the steps we're going to take. It's going to be better for the long run, but those were the conversations that need to happen, and they need to be moving in the direction. It's not going to be like, hey, Monday morning, you're in charge. It's just never going to work that way. So go into it understanding that, this is the path I want to take, why I want to take it that way, and where it comes into play, and just be ready for it. And if you see the writing on the wall, this isn't going to work, then that's where you got to figure out, your next moves.
Yeah,
for sure.
Absolutely. Well, for me, you can connect with me on most socials, Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, or you can email me as well. My email is just taylor@jjinsurance.com. And I'm just going to reiterate what Mike just said. The communication is key. That's what the only reason I am where I am is because we had some of those hard conversations. And also, like what Mike just said, it's not overnight. You have to kind of know that it's going to take some time. And for me, that was a little bit of a hard pill to swallow too, because I thought it was going to be a little quicker than what it's turning out to be. But at the same time, I'm now realizing that it wouldn't have worked if it just flipped a switch overnight. And now, because there's so many things I'm learning that I wasn't in charge of before. So you're going to have to kind of slowly segue into that. And then if not, then you kind of have to pivot where you need to, but that communication is definitely key. So thank you guys again.
Patience is so hard.
Oh yeah.
Patience. Yeah. Communication and patience. Those are the two. Yeah.
And,
sure.
and make sure to check yourself. Listen to what Mike just said about make sure this is what you want. I know he said early on too. Not everybody wants to be the owner. Not everybody. Maybe have you put your work in. It's not going to happen overnight. But if there's a situation, I really think this episode can really impact a lot of people. I greatly appreciate you guys here. I'm going to get the look from Sean shortly, so we'll wrap it up. Everybody, please do us a favor. Share this with anybody that you know. Maybe they're part of the transition. Maybe they're that generation that's handing it off to the next generation. Share this episode. I really hope that it can impact anybody. And again, reach out to any of us if there's any information or any discussion you want to have around it. Guys, thank you again for being here. Everybody, that's another episode of the Scratch and Z podcast. Thanks for joining us. Do us a favor. Like the show, share the show, and subscribe. Most importantly, remember to dig down deep, and probably most importantly in this entire show so far, believe in yourself and own your own future. We'll see you next week. Take care.